Hey guys, and welcome back. Today I want to give you a quick overview and review of the Fresh Roast SR540 coffee maker. So to go ahead and get started, as far as price and my general thoughts, I think this is probably going to be one of the best and more economical ways to roast your coffee in home, aside from essentially throwing it in a pot or pan and then just stirring it on heat on the oven. So the device itself will essentially take all of the guesswork out of the roasting process, and it's probably one of the better devices on the market in this price category as far as quality and just general ability to roast a pretty consistent cup of coffee. So to go ahead and get started, this is currently retailing online for about $189, and that's across most retailers, including Amazon, Coffee Corral, and several others. That price is going to be subject to change based on various sales and promotions, etc. But you can expect it to fall somewhere in that category, at least close to the date of filming. Again, that will change over time. To go ahead and get started, out of the box, you will notice that you're going to have a user manual, all of your warranty information. There is a warranty you can activate online for a 1-year warranty, assuming that's still being offered throughout the life of this product, as well as a scoop you will see to the left, which will essentially, it'll outline in the manual itself the recommendations, but from what I've seen, it looks like about 4 full scoops, leveled off, not mounted, will be enough to basically max out the roaster. It will not fill it all the way, but that's the recommendation to allow optimum airflow. If you want, there is a chamber online, which is this piece right here, that you can purchase separately. It's not terribly expensive, and it is extended to allow for essentially double or close to double the capacity. Again, most of these parts you can purchase online separately. For example, I dropped the top piece, which I'll show you in a second, which collects the chaff from the coffee. And that top piece is probably $12 to $20 online because it is in 2 different parts. So there's a part with a screen. We'll show you that shortly. But this is what you're basically going to see right out of the box. The coffee grinder on the left is not included. So running straight into general use on really the day-to-day basis. It is noted several times in the manual that you do not leave this plugged in and unattended. So if you were going to plug it in overnight, leave the house, or go to bed, it's not recommended. This does consume quite a bit of power. And there are very specific pieces of information in the manual regarding where to plug the device in. It really just seems like their point to note is this generates a lot of heat. There is a potential for fire. Obviously, with any electrical device that consumes excessive amounts of power, it will also present opportunities to potentially like blow a fuse, things of that nature. Don't let that frighten you. I've been using this for probably 6 to 7 months. As long as you follow the manual, you should be fine. So just bear in mind, it's just general liability issues that the company makes sure to cover, but it's noted several times, so I did feel like it was worth mentioning. As far as use day to day, when you first plug the device in, you will see a screen right here with 4 dashes. These dashes each mean something separate, or when the numbers light up, they are corresponding to the fan, the power, and the timer. So when you first turn this on, you hit power, you'll see a 9, 8, and an 8.5. Those are the default values. And honestly, you could probably run these for most green beans and will likely end up with a relatively dark roast. So to actually change these values, this dial on the left will rotate. You must press down to engage and it'll start blinking right here. If you press down, it'll continue to move to the right and cycle back through. Turning to the right will increase the numbers, maximum being 9. To the left will decrease down to 1. Now, the fan, 1 being the lowest, 9 being the highest, is basically the amount of air that's produced in this base. The heat itself, from 1 being the lowest, 9 being the highest, is going to be essentially the amount of heat that's produced that the fan will then circulate. The timer right here on the right, it goes from 1 to 9 being the percentage of a minute, with to the left being the whole minute itself. So a couple recommendations here. You can adjust this while it is running, but I recommend trying to choose a setting. Let's just say if we chose 7s across the board, by pressing the dial and rotating and pressing the dial again. When you stop touching the dial, it will go back to all these numbers being solid. Doesn't matter if they're blinking or not, it will still run as normal. But if you were to set a setting like this, roast your first batch of coffee, and let's just say it comes out as a light roast, you know that Sevens across the board is going to create a light roast coffee. You'll know the flavor profile, so you can kind of adjust accordingly from there. So at the very least, if you aren't able to be there attending to the coffee at all times when it's roasting, you know what to expect. Then you can adjust your heat and fan levels accordingly. Most individuals I've seen online recommend a fan level between 7 and 9 in the beginning with a pretty high heat, just to heat the coffee to that light brown color, and then adjusting to slow down the roast to increase that flavor profile or change the flavor profile. So once you chose your settings, you hit start. It will immediately start. I don't have any coffee in at the moment, but you'll see the counter start going down. You can adjust everything from here. So we can turn the fan down so you can hear me a little bit better. And then if you wanted to start the cooling process, you can press it again and it'll start cooling. The important thing to note about cooling, once the timer runs out, it will immediately engage the cooling process as well. Although this does continue to roast the coffee because there is still residual heat circulating through. So try to make sure to stop your roasting a little bit closer to the end, but not quite at the final stages, so that the cooling process, when it kicks out that residual heat, can really finalize that for you. Now, as far as the parts, you will see this top piece will come off. I highly recommend that you be careful with this, as it is broken down into two separate parts. So you will see when you take it apart, although I haven't cleaned it, you can tell I've definitely been using it quite a bit. This piece is where the air circulates through. That piece is where the chaff collects, as you can see. That has a screen built in, which is again a piece that I dropped when I first got this. I was able to buy the backup online for probably like 18 bucks. You also see this glass container, and this is one of those replacement parts, probably between 20 to 30 bucks online. You can also buy the extended piece, which will be a little bit more and allow you to roast more coffee as well. So a couple recommendations on using this. Again, it is one that you can kind of just leave alone, but I would highly recommend, not only per the manual, but just to understand the roast, that you stick around. Make sure that you're paying attention to the beans as they're roasting, and as you're doing your research and understanding what first crack and second crack is, you'll be able to better understand when your beans are actually progressing through the light roast to medium roast to dark roast categories, and you'll get a better feel for where they are in the process, what the heating and cooling is doing, and also what they smell like. There's a very distinct smell as they are going through this process as well, that you'll get to a point where you can actually know, based on almost a burnt smell, that you're maybe in like a medium roast or dark roast, and you'll be able to tell pretty much from across the house. This is very, very fragrant, so you will be able to smell this pretty much anywhere in the house, regardless of whether or not you're upstairs or downstairs. And it is relatively loud, so you're probably not going to be watching TV or YouTube videos unless you're in another room. Overall, again, it's one of those that you can pretty much leave running as long as you're relatively close to the device, bearing in mind once more, this generates quite a bit of heat. If you roast your beans too long, there is potential for them to catch on fire. The likelihood being pretty minimal as long as you're following all of the guidelines, but when you're dealing with a device that generates this much heat and something that actually dries out a product that could potentially become flammable, there are individuals out there who have actually had the beans catch on fire in the roaster. So don't let that deter you. Overall, I would highly recommend this product. I've been using it for about 5 to 6 months now. I've purchased a ridiculous amount of coffee online, and I can tell you that it produces a very consistent roast. So you find the settings that you really, really enjoy. They won't work for every coffee bean. And it is important to remember that the flavor profile is partially due to the roasting process, but it could also be due to the coffee beans themselves. So when you're using products like this, make sure that you're aware of the beans that you're using, where they're coming from, general quality standards there as well. If they come out tasting a little bit differently, it could be due to the actual coffee bean itself. And again, when you're using different beans, they have different drying methods, different densities. So you're not going to be able to use the same settings for every single type of coffee bean. So it is one of those things that you have to kind of get a feel for. But overall, I would highly recommend it. For something like this, you can buy the green beans in bulk online, and you don't really need to have or purchase replaceable parts for this. I've used it as is without purchasing any additional parts aside from what I broke on accident, but you can pretty much run this thing for, I'm going to guess, several years. Outside of general cleaning, there's not much that you're going to need to do with it or to it to keep it running. And then the green beans sometimes can be a little bit cheaper online depending on the sources. So overall, in the long run, you can save a little bit of money and just create a pretty fun hobby. Now, if you have any questions about the product and really just the process itself, feel free to leave any comments down below. I would also recommend just listing where you like to get your coffee beans from, what coffee roasters you use, and any tips or tricks that you may have for anyone else out there. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check back in for more videos.